Robert John Maudsley was born in Speke in Liverpool in June 1955. It was an unhappy house. He was a Catholic. His parents, George and Jean, were both Catholics. They had 5 children, Paul, Kevin, Robert and Brenda. And then they had Robert. So that was 5.
You said Paul, Kevin, Robert and Brenda.
Yeah, but
and then
there's Robert. Robert was the youngest. So it's Robert, Paul, Kevin. Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's 4 children.
Yeah.
Forgive me.
No worries.
Brain fade takes over after a while. The parents can't cope, and the children are put into a care home run by nuns called Nazareth House in Crosby in Liverpool. George and Jean proceed to have the 5th child, I was getting mistaken about, while they're away in Nazareth House.
Oh, that's great. So they can't look after their children, so they send them away and then they have another one.
Yes, I'm afraid it gets worse. Well, Maudsley, being the youngest, quite likes the nuns. He doesn't mind Nazareth House. It's quite comfortable. He gets, I think, better treatment than he got at home. And so he rather settles in. And he's a bit difficult, and he's given to displays of temper. In particular, he bangs his head on the wall. Back to that old...
Did you get dropped on your head as a baby?
That old theory. Do psychopaths always have they always had their head banged against the wall? And did this affect his behaviour? Maybe, maybe not. Anyway, then the bad things start. His parents took him home. All the 4 in Nazareth House, plus the one they've got. And his father, George, really didn't like Robert. He thought he was weakly, he was no good, he was useless. We're talking about 1965 in Liverpool. I mean, just to give it some context, we're talking about the Beatles, we're talking about the Cavern Club, but there were still families who acted as if it was 1935, not 1965. George and Jean went on to have another 7 children.
What?
Yeah, went on to have 12 altogether.
They had another 7 children?
On top of those 5, yes. I'm not making any point here. The only thing that Maudsley remembers of his childhood when he was back with his parents was being locked in his room for 6 months and beaten 4 to 6 times a day by his father.
Oh my God, poor boy.
He used sticks and rods. At one point he broke a .22 air rifle over his back. Eventually, after a number of years, Robert Maudsley is rescued by social services and put into foster homes. His father responded by telling the rest of the children that Robert was dead. This was not what you might describe as a happy house. In fact, you could describe it as horrifying. In fact, I would also add that it's possible to shed more than a tear for Robert Maudsley in spite of what was go on to happen. He's sent to his foster homes. His father says he's dead. And at the age of 16, at the end of the 60s, he goes to London, where he develops a drug habit and starts working as a rent boy for male homosexuals to make a living and to feed his habit. Now, you could argue that the entire genesis of Robert Maudsley's psychopathology lies in his treatment by his father. He came to loathe paedophiles of all kinds. Now, no one knows whether there's been any sexual element to Maudsley's abuse as a child, but what is abundantly clear is he developed an absolute obsession with paedophiles. He was working as a rent boy, doing his best to survive. There were a number of psychiatric episodes. He attempts suicide. He's a terribly, terribly disturbed adolescent.
Very damaged.
You know, he's not just a little bit disturbed. He is terribly disturbed. And he is by now, after the various psychiatric interventions, he's claiming to hear voices. Maudsley once said, and I think it was chilling, "If I'd killed my mother and father, none of this would have happened, and I'd be walking around a free man now." And he never resolved that hatred, that rage that he felt for his treatment by his parents. Never, ever resolved it. And it's at the heart of what was to go on to happen. That abuse, and call it what you will, lies at the very heart of what happened in the rest of his life. In 1974, maybe late 73, the dates are a bit fluid, he was picked up by a man called John Farrell in Wood Green. But Farrell made the mistake of showing Maudsley pictures of 7 children that he'd abused. In other words, he'd taken Polaroids, which he was very proud of. And Maudsley snapped. He garroted him with a wire. And remember, we're talking about a boy who is 18, 19. He's declared unfit to stand trial because of the psychiatric episodes, because of the violence, and is sent to Broadmoor, the secure psychiatric hospital in Berkshire, famous in its day. It contained many famous killers, including at that point Ronnie Cray. Maudsley, doesn't get what you might describe as therapeutic treatment. Broadmoor in those days was a different institution from what it's become now. Indeed, all the psychiatric hospitals, the secure hospitals, are different. But we are talking about 1974, a very long time ago. The levels of talking therapy, the levels of therapy available weren't very great. And in a sense, Maudsley began to develop a vision that he was abandoned, that he was just shoved away. He's a very young man. He's sent to Broadmoor. There's no trial. And at that point, I think Maudsley literally goes into a psychotic break. At the age of 22, Maudsley, together with another prisoner, inmate, take a convicted paedophile called David Francis hostage in a locked room in Broadmoor. They lock themselves in a room, the 3 of them, and they torture Francis for 9 hours. Now, no one knows exactly what happened, but what is clear is that eventually, after this prolonged torture of this man, Maudsley and the other inmate held him up, held the body aloft so that the prison staff, the warders, could see what had happened. And here's where Maudsley's legend began. One of the fascinating things about treatment at Broadmoor is that you weren't allowed a plastic knife. If you go to a prison and you get your lunch, you're usually given a plastic knife. In Broadmoor, you never were. You only got a spoon. But Maudsley had broken the longer part of the spoon.
Made a shank.
Into 2 parts and made a shank of it. And towards the end of the torture of David Francis, he shoved the shank into Francis's ear